Hello, my name is Joy Barsness, and this is my term video project for Indigenous Studies 100 taught by Wendy Lynn Leroy. I'm going to be focusing on the Nenet people of Russia, and I will give you a brief background on their lifestyle and culture, and then go into the importance of reindeer and climate, and then talk a bit about how their lives parallel the First Nations peoples in Canada here, and then just a reflection and my understanding of this material. The Nenet people live off the land. As one Nenet said, "The land is everything. Everything the Nenets do has a purpose, and this can be seen in the way they live." The Nenet people have an intriguing lifestyle that has them migrating thousands of kilometers each year, herding the reindeer from winter to summer pastures and then back from summer to winter pastures. The Nenets live in chums made from long wooden poles covered in reindeer hide. When the Nenet people set up their camps, they use sledges and organize them in a half circle around the chums. The women's belongings and supplies are at the front, and the men's are at the back with a sacred sledge. These sledges are used to carry all of the Nenets' belongings as they trek across the Arctic. In the Nenet lifestyle, gender is defined to a point. Men are in charge of buying and selling, whereas the women are in charge of the household. This does not mean the women do not work hard. Nenet women would think nothing of carrying a massive jug of water, or chopping wood, or putting up tent poles. When a Nenet chum is set up, there are certain rules that must be followed, such as the women must not step over any ropes or reindeer driving sticks, and they're not allowed to cross the imaginary line on the backside of the chum, which is the men's side. The men must not step on floorboards or touch wooden poles used for the chum. There are some exceptions to these rules when a job needs to get done immediately and everyone's help is needed. In researching the Nenet people, I found there was a lot of things that I didn't know about just Indigenous cultures in general. The Nenet people call themselves Nenetka, which in their language means real humans, and I found that really interesting in that they saw real humans as people who lived off the land and who just, responded to the land and took care of the land. And I find that very interesting because if they call themselves real humans, do they consider us fake humans in that we're so far disconnected from the land that we can't be real? In regards to gender, I found it very interesting that although they had separate jobs that they were to do, there was this element of everyone worked hard. It didn't matter what you were doing, you worked hard. The women were not afraid to chop wood or put up the tent poles because that was their job and that's what they were to do. And I just find it very interesting because in our culture there's such a stigma with hard work and women and how we're to be just like the caretakers of the home. And although that's changing, I feel that these people show another side to that you can be a caretaker, but also you can work hard at the same time. The sacred sledge mentioned earlier carried dolls which represent the local deities or ancestors. One doll is specifically known as the Old Woman of the Chum and is the people's protector of their living spaces. These dolls have their own sleeping place in the chum, but other than that are usually left in peace unless something is needed of them. When help is needed, the people will feed them blood or vodka. I found it interesting how the Nenet people showed respect in their spiritual beliefs. Although they had these dolls that represented ancestors and deities, they didn't use them all the time. They only used them when they needed help. And I think that's very interesting to note that they didn't see them as this ongoing thing they could draw from, but only in a time of need they would use them. Reindeer are vital to the Nenets' lifestyle and are so important to them they are always treated with respect. Every Nenet has their own personal sacred reindeer that is not killed or harnessed until it can no longer walk. Reindeer are everything to the Nenet people. As one Nenet stated, the reindeer is our home, our food, our warmth, and our transportation. The reindeer also drive the Nenet economy as the Nenet's main income is from selling reindeer privately. When I first looked up the Nenet people, I saw that reindeer were a large part of their life, but I didn't realize how much they were a part of their life until I started digging deeper. In the quote that says that reindeer are everything, they literally are to the Nenet people. They're their home and how they follow them around. They're their clothing. They make all their clothing out of this hides. They're their house in that the chums are made from the hide as well. They are their food. They drink the blood. They eat the meat raw or boiled or frozen. And if the reindeer die, this people group will die as well. And so they are truly everything to this people group. Regina, Saskatchewan is over 6,600 kilometers away from the Yamal Peninsula where the Nenet people live. The climate that the Nenet people live in is very unique. At some points in the winter, the temperature can go down to minus 50 degrees Celsius. The Yamal Peninsula is known as the wind-blasted place of permafrost, but now with climate change, that definition is changing. Climate change is a huge problem for this people group. The melting permafrost makes it hard for the reindeer to find food and walk. It also has caused the freshwater lakes to drain, therefore declining their fish supply. The slight plus to climate change is that trade is becoming more possible because the ice is melting and people can get through. As much as reindeer are important to the Nenet people, so is the climate they live in. And when I first started researching, I thought the climate would be a downfall and a setback for them, but they actually use it for their advancement, and it was really interesting to see that. But with climate change happening, this people is going to become extinct because of the weather changes, and those weather changes will impact the reindeer and therefore will impact the Nenet people, and soon there will be none of them left. I found it fascinating to see how Indigenous groups are so similar. I didn't expect to find many similarities, but I did, and today I'm going to share with you 5 of them. That Nenet people were forced to live in villages called brigades, just like the Indigenous peoples here in Canada were forced to live on reserve. Children were taken away from their Indigenous families to go to boarding school. Now, the Nenet people have seemed to accept this by now, and it's a normal part of their culture. But I read one article, and it talked about how the children were not allowed to speak their language, they weren't allowed to wear traditional dress, but the schools compensated by saying they put up decorations that showed the kids their culture. And that's kind of like a slap in the face to their culture, because decorations, that's all a culture is. That's really not true. Both Indigenous cultures were very respectful of the land and didn't waste anything. So when the Nenet people would kill a reindeer, everything was used. The blood, the skin, the meat, the hide. Just like when the First Nations people here in Canada would kill a bison, they would use every part of it. Both of these Indigenous groups lived in tents. Now the Nenets called theirs a chum, whereas the Indigenous peoples here in Canada called them a teepee, but essentially they were the same thing with poles with animal hide around. Both Indigenous groups believe that they are stewards of the land. Now this means that the land could not be sold or bought, but other groups have come in and tried to take over the land without compensating these groups. Now, there has been some compensation, for example, for the First Nations peoples here, but that compensation is in no way enough. For this project, I had never really taken the time to research or think about other Indigenous groups. In school, we were often taught about our own people, the white man, or if we were taught about other groups, they were usually the civilized or modern group of the country. For example, if we learned about Russia, we didn't learn about the Nenet people, who were the Indigenous people of Russia. We learned about the people who were living in the cities and who were running the country. In this, I can see that our education system focuses only on the modern, and that kind of makes me angry because there's a lot of Indigenous and historical content that is lost in our education system. because of this lack of education, these people are quickly becoming forgotten and extinct. Although education is only one of the factors, another factor that I learned about was climate change and how much of an impact it has on these people. Now, although we can't educate everyone on every single indigenous group, we can change how we're living here right now to affect climate change. And if we make a positive influence here, it does affect the whole world. In doing this project, I have come to the better understanding of several things. Number one, the world is so interconnected in so many ways. And I saw this in how the indigenous people were so alike in many ways, and also how climate change is affecting not only the people here, but also the people halfway across the globe. And three, diverse education is one of the main keys to understanding our history and past historical situations, and also the world today.